Hello and welcome to the Beer Chef. In today's video, I'm going to walk you through a simple and efficient way to apply your hopper to a pint of 3 brew. It's not necessary to store these hop oils, the hoppers, in a fridge like you would with fresh hops or fresh hop pellets. These are made with a carrier which is glycerol, and that acts as a preservative and carrier for the hop oil. And as you can see by the use by date on these, it's usually 12 months from manufacturing date. Of course, these are kept in the Pinter beer kit boxes at ambient room temperature. They're not stored in a chilled environment. So when you get these, if you put them in the fridge, it will thicken up the oil and just make the transfer into your brew that bit harder. So I personally recommend that you just pop it into one of your kitchen cupboards out of direct sunlight in the shade, where it will keep perfectly fine until you come to apply it to your brew. The brew I have here is the Yeasty Boys Big Mouth Remixed. I have gone through the fermentation process, of course, so this is now ready for the hop addition. I am looking to disconnect it from the dock before I add the hop oil, so that the hop oil doesn't run into the dock and go to waste. I would recommend that if you wish to cold crash with your dock in situ before you go into conditioning, then I would get that process. Maybe you're doing a couple of days cold crash with the dock connected, get that process out of the way before you add the hopper. So only add the hopper in the instance after you have disconnected your dock. So I will go ahead and disconnect this dock. Before I proceed to add the hopper, I will rinse off any of this mess on the front of the Pinter, and I will take the opportunity to thoroughly clean the dock and put that aside ready for my next brew before I proceed with the hop. I like to clean the dock straight away, because if you give it time to dry, then it can make it much more difficult to thoroughly clean it inside and out. So I tend to prioritize that as the first thing I do. Once I've disconnected the dock, I get it cleaned and put away, know that it's ready now for the next brew. So now we can move on with this. Of course, we will flip the Pinter upright with the tap hanging over the sink. I've removed the hop port cap and put it out of the way. I like to give this hopping port a quick spray with sanitizer. I wouldn't say that this is essential. If you don't have a acid-based sanitizer convenient in a spray bottle already, then I wouldn't put yourself out to achieve this. For me, it's just a habit. It's probably good practice, but I would say that the actual fermentation now, because it is complete and there's alcohol in the beer, that is a real hostile environment for bacteria. So the risk of bacterial infection at this point is really quite low. And of course, we're going to go ahead and put this in the fridge at low temperatures, which will inhibit the growth of bacteria as well. So I don't think it's a risk that you really should be too concerned about. However, if you do have an acid-based sanitizer, something like Chemsan, that you can keep a little spray bottle aside, this is very convenient for sanitizing things with your brewing equipment as you process and go along. So here's the hopper, of course. Now, although this has not been in the fridge, it's been kept at room temperature. Of course, what is room temperature? You know, in the winter, room temperature can be, quite considerably low. And of course, the lower the temperature, the more this oil will thicken up. So it's probably not a bad idea to pop this into a cup and just put some hot water in it to fill the oil and leave it for just 2 minutes to warm up, so that it will make this more fluid and it will make the transfer more efficient. So I'll go ahead and do that now. So this hopper has now been sitting in this cup of hot water for 3 minutes, which should sufficiently warm up this oil nicely. So of course, you take the lid off. Now, when you come to apply this hopper, you want to screw this in tight so that the edge of this, the plastic shroud around the edge, butts up tight against the hopping port. You need to know for sure that the valve is all the way open, so make sure that that is nice and tight and that you can visually see that that is connected and screwed in as far as it could possibly go. Now, I don't know if I can get this label off, probably not without making a mess, but I'm going to try and show you this port. I don't know if I'm going to be successful in this. Now, if you can see inside that, I'm hoping that you can. That oil now has already gone. That bottle is already empty. You know, that's how quick it is. You know, literally in 30 seconds, that bottle should be virtually empty. Now, what I can see at the very bottom is just a couple of bubbles and some slight residue of the oil right at the very bottom, just at the mouth of the port. So very quickly you can see that in the first 30 seconds the hop bottle, the hopper, is nearly empty. It's only just around where the valve actually goes into the unit that there's still residual oil floating around. Now, I want you to think of the inside of the hopping port. There's a flat rubber disc, and let's say there's the surface of the hopping port and a flat rubber disc. And when you actually push the hopper bottle inside, it separates the rubber disc. And when you unscrew the hopping bottle, then the spring, it's spring loaded, and the spring then will force the rubber back up against a surface internally of the hopping port. Now, with oil, you imagine that this plastic disc, when it's saturated with oil, it doesn't make a great contact. The oil itself can actually create a gap between the disc and the surface because of the high viscosity of the oil. So a great tip for you here to successfully complete this and finalize it so that you don't have oil leaking out when you unscrew the bottle is as follows. So this is what we're going to do. We're looking at lifting the pinter up, just spinning it around and setting it down in the horizontal position, because what this is going to do is flood the bottle. What we're going to do is flood the bottle with beer. This bottle is now flooded with beer. Unfortunately, I don't think you're going to be able to see this on the camera, but you might be able to now. That is cloudy and full of beer, and we will now stand the pinter back up, which will drain the bottle. We'll give it a couple of seconds and then we'll flip it back down again. We'll flood the bottle. We'll give it a couple of seconds and then we'll flip it back up again. So that now has been flushed twice. Again, unfortunately, you probably won't be able to see this, but that bottle now is beautifully clean and empty. It has been rinsed through. So what rinsing the bottle has achieved, it's achieved two essential things here. It is obviously cleaned the bottle and transferred all the oil, so there's not a single drop of hop oil that has been missed. But also the actual beer itself has flushed it now into the beer mix, and these rubber discs I was talking to you about, the contact, that now is not saturated in hop oil. It has been flushed with beer. That beer, of course, contains alcohol, which is almost like a cleaning agent. So the alcohol has flushed that disc. And when we take this hopping bottle out, we can be assured now that we're going to have a clean valve and it's going to close. That valve is going to be clean. It's going to close off nicely. It's going to be gas tight. We're going to have no concerns that the oil is going to allow what I really call a micro leak. And I've seen this myself where the oil thick actually separates the actual rubber disc slightly. And if you test the hopping port, you can see actually micro bubbles, teeny little bubbles coming out, which actually prove to you that the actual hopping port now, after the application of the hopper, is no longer gas tight. Now, them micro bubbles, if that continues to just have a micro leak and you go ahead and put it in the fridge, if you've not flushed out the hop oil, of course, you can now start to see hop oil seep out of this micro leak. But worse than that, it can slowly but surely start to degas your Pinter 3, and that will affect the carbonation of your beer. So down the line, perhaps 7 to 10 days into conditioning, you'll pour your first pint and it'll be as flat as a pancake because there's been a micro leak letting out the gas. So that is really my tip and trick for this. I'm not taking claim that I'm the first person that's invented this, incidentally. I'm not saying that I'm the first person that's ever done this. This is no doubt been done, by many people before me, but it is an excellent idea, for them two reasons: to get all that oil out, get a clean transfer, and clean the valve for reseating. So I'll go ahead now and take the actual hopping bottle out now, and I will try and show you how clean that transfer is, and then I'll give you one final tip. So here we go. Now I'm going to remove the bottle, and what I want to remind you of when you do this is pay attention to what you're doing. A lot of people take these bottles off, screw the cap in without paying any attention, and then find hop oil running down the back of the Pinter. They've got a problem. They don't even know about a problem until it's been in the fridge for a few days and there's hop oil leaked all over the fridge. So, this is not something that you do, mindlessly. You've really got to be mindful of what you're doing here and pay attention. So when you remove this, of course, check the bottle. That bottle is totally clean and empty. And if I can just get this camera down here now, you want to be looking inside your port and be mindful straight away. Has that been a successful transfer? Is all the oil gone? Is all the oil inside the vessel? From here, you can see that clearly is the case. So that oil now, we know is inside this vessel, and if there's any kind of leakage, we know that there's a problem that occurred after the point in which we've applied this, and that the oil did transfer successfully. And if any oil came out of here now, we'd know that it's leaking out of here, not that we had a failed transfer. Now, the final tip that I would give you, and it only takes 2 minutes, and I actually do this every time that I have applied a hopper, and that is, just for your own peace of mind, get yourself a small measure of water, just regular tap water is fine. Fill up your hopping port. I'll fill it right to the top. I'll tip all that away when I'm ready. Any bubbles that are sitting on the top, flash them off and go right up. Pay close attention and look, just like, if you're like me anyway, when you were a kid, if you can remember checking an inner tube for a puncture inside a bucket of water, well, that's exactly what we're doing here. If there's any gas leaking here and you don't have a gas tight seal, you'll see teeny little bubbles rising from that seal or from that valve at some point. And if that's the case, then you need to discard the water, get this hopper bottle ready again, screw it back in, rinse it further, and then unscrew it again to reseat the actual valve. Or you can just try screwing it in and out a couple of times, in and out. But one thing I would say is, if you follow this procedure that I'm talking you through today, and you flush this bottle thoroughly and you see all the oil's gone, you can be pretty much rest assured that that will never show a micro leak. If you follow this procedure, it will always be successful, and you will not have to have any concerns about using the bottle to reseat the valve. You know, that is the case that if you don't flush the bottle out, and whether it's through the oil or a bit of foil caught in there or whatever it might be, there's bubbles coming up here. I have found that's the most successful way to get the bottle, screw it in, which will open the valve, and then light again, and screw it in to open the valve again, and then recheck with the water. Once you're happy that the transfer has been successful and you've checked that with water and you can see no rising bubbles from the actual valve connection, then of course you can just upend your pinter, and I just set it on its upright position so that any water that might have leaked over the edges or is in that hopping port can drain away. So I'd leave it like that for 2 minutes for the water to run off, and then pop it up, dry it, and then pop the hopping port cap back in, and then of course into your fridge for conditioning. One final thought on these hop additions from Pinter. The carrier that they use to carry the hop oils on these, glycerol, it is a preservative and it does keep the hop oil well, and it is suitable. It is obviously food grade. It's suitable for the transfer in a liquid form. So it's good in many aspects, but one thing that I probably should point out, and lots of people will have reported this at some time or another, you might have experienced it yourself, and that is these can sometimes add quite a synthetic taste to your beer, which is quite unpleasant. Now, there's two things that can happen. Glycerol itself actually has a kind of synthetic sweetness to it, which is really quite unpleasant in beer. And so when you finish conditioning your beer and you've added a hopper, if you can taste an unnatural sweetness and you think, oh, that tastes off, more often than not, if you've added a hopper, it will be the glycerol from the hop addition, not a problem that you've had with fermentation. You know, often when there's sweetness in fermented beer, people might think that the fermentation had an issue, it was under fermented, and there is too much residual sweetness because the fermentation stalled or there was a problem. But I would say that if you've added a hop addition, one of Pinter's hoppers, and you taste that kind of synthetic sweetness towards the end, then I can be absolutely almost 100% sure it will be down to this hopper. Now, if you actually use one of these, like this one, definitely for this Big Mouth remixed, once you've actually applied it, you've gone ahead and you're putting that into conditioning, if you hold this bottle back and smell it, it really doesn't smell pleasant. That's just the God's honest truth. It smells very synthetic, and that's the kind of like the second issue, like a synthetic sweetness, but probably worse than that, just a synthetic taste, full stop. I mean, this might be a little bit exaggerated, but it can often taste like you've got like melted plastic in your beer. You know, it's really off-putting. It's not pleasant at all. Now, some of these hoppers are worse for that than others. I mean, the stout, you know, I think it was the cookies and cream, Pinter's cookies and cream, I think they call it. The hopper that came with that, just because of the nature of the drink, it didn't have that kind of synthetic sweetness or the synthetic taste. I didn't pick it up at all. So the hopper for that worked fine because these sort of like taste and aromas were well hidden. They were probably still there, but well hidden by the stout. But a lot of these IPAs or pale ales or some of the others where you get the hoppers, you know, it's hit and miss. Some of them are worse than others, but you know that you don't smell that like fresh hops and think, that smells amazing. Honestly, when you smell that, it smells very synthetic and a little bit, you know, definitely a little bit off-putting. Now, I've obviously applied this to this beer because I wanted to show you guys how I go about applying these hoppers. But I'll be perfectly honest, I try and avoid the beers with these hop additions. I used to think it was great, it's a good idea. I mean, I love the hopping port because, of course, it allows us to recharge with CO2. So I'm forever grateful that it is there, but I don't actually buy these beers anymore. This is the last one that I'll probably buy with a hopper, because I wanted the empty bottle for another project and wanted to do this video to show you guys the most up-to-date technique for applying this. But you know, for me it's hit and miss. The only reason why I'm saying that is that I don't want to undo your enjoyment, you know, but I don't want you to think that you've done something wrong either and had a failed brew. If you use one of these hoppers and when you taste your beer it tastes off either synthetically or like a synthetic sweetness, then I just want to forewarn you that it really is going to be down to this. And the only way that you can sometimes reduce that syntheticness is to prolong the conditioning phase. But if you have to leave it to condition for an extra 10 days to get rid of this synthetic taste, along with that synthetic taste is the actual taste of the hops themselves are diminishing. So, you know, if you have to extend your conditioning by 10 days, you're really defeating the whole object, because the taste of the hoppiness is going with the synthetic taste. So I actually prefer using the fresh hop pellets and, you know, just putting dry hops in there. I'm quite happy to put a 10-gram loose dry hop into the Pinter, or just a hop stand, you know, 20-30 gram hop stand in a saucepan with the worked heated up. That's my preferred method. So anyway, that's it. That's the heads up. You know, you've got the lowdown on these now. You've seen how I apply them, and you've kind of got a pretty good idea of what I generally think of them. So there you have it. That is it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.